All right, we're going to sing number 829. And then after that, Brother Ray will lead us in a word of prayer. 829. All right, tonight we are going to continue our study in the book of Daniel, and we are in chapter 5 tonight. Daniel's a good book, and again, as we've already said several times, the real value of any Old Testament study that we do is to find out the lesson that God was giving to the people of that day, and then see how we can apply that to ourselves, and see if there's anything that we can gain which will help us either in our spiritual growth or perhaps in the living of our life in this world today. Chapter 5, I assume you've got your questions. Number 1 says, King Belshazzar, either the son or grandson of Nebuchadnezzar, celebrates himself with a banquet. What do you think about his purpose on using the vessels from the temple in Jerusalem?
The apple doesn't fall far from the tree.
I think you said the great word, the important word there is his arrogance. Uh, what does it mean? I mean, here are dishes, utensils that were supposed to be used in the temple in the worshiping of Yahweh. And of course, they captured Jerusalem. They cleaned out all the gold. So he has all these gold goblets and different things like that. And they're drinking out of them. What in your mind is he saying by doing this? Junie's spoken. Let's see what some of the rest of you have to say. All right. He sees himself as more important than God, or Yahweh God, the God of the Jews, is how he would say it.
I was thinking about when we drag out our very best dishes, finery, that's usually because we either have a very special occasion to celebrate or we're trying to impress people. And I think maybe that was part of this too.
Yeah.
He wanted to declare his power in a lavish way.
And again, understanding the mindset of everybody in that period, not just him, but gods were geographical. You know, a god was a god over an area. To be the god of New Mexico, the god of Texas, the god of Oklahoma, maybe even a place like Texas, it might be the god of West Texas and the god of East Texas. But gods were regional. And the gods typically protected their homeland. So what has happened in Israel? The enemy came in and did what? Defeated them, which metaphorically is saying, I whipped your God. I didn't just whip you and your army, I whipped your God. So here I am drinking out of his goblet. You know, it's like, the Native American Indian used to practice something they call coup, where I never understood it exactly, but somehow in a battle, if they could run and touch you and not kill you, just run and touch you and then get away, that was a sign of their skill and bravery and etc. Well, he's drinking out of the goblet of God, Yahweh, so it's a coup. Look what I got. Yeah, in your face, right. So it's a put down and a lifting up of himself. The arrogance, which is what you said in your first sentence. There's a lot of arrogance here. And for me, when we started in chapter 1, that's what we've been dealing with sort of the whole time here with these kings as they, well, after all, look what they've done. They've conquered the known world. That's pretty big. You know, I mean,
every time we feel a little arrogant about ourselves, man has a way of humbling us. And he does it in a subtle way.
yeah. And God's going to humble him because, yeah. And sometimes it's little ways, sometimes it's big ways. And he's going to get both. Yeah. But the issue here is he's demonstrating his arrogance and his power over the God of Israel, over Yahweh. And at least what he thinks is his power because he defeated him. You know, I don't want to lower this in any way, but it's like in some of our athletic things. My team beat your team. You know, you went to one school or you root for one professional team and my team won, so yada yada, you know. My team won, so it makes me better than you. And so we get the bragging rights and et cetera. So it's a thing of arrogance. It's a thing of where he feels like he's in control of the world and he basically can do anything he wants to do.
One of the passages I read said he might have been influenced to do this by the amount of liquor he had been drinking, because it makes notation
Yeah.
in verse 2 that while he was drinking, he gave orders to bring in.
Yeah.
And they'd been drinking for a while. Maybe.
Yeah, that's a possibility, but it is amazing what alcohol does to us, to human beings.
It makes you do things that you wouldn't normally do.
Yeah. I still remember a radio talk show host. His name will pop in my head in a minute. This was many years ago, and he had quit drinking, and he said, my wife and I used to go out with two couples every Tuesday, whatever it was, and they had dinner together. And he said, I thought they were the funniest people in the world. And he said, then I quit drinking. And they weren't funny. They're just stupid drunks. And when I was drunk, I was like them. So he may be full of his liquor. And yeah, that could influence his arrogance, his boastfulness. And if you've been around people who have a struggle with alcohol, you know that. You've seen it in them. Maybe you've even seen it in yourself, that they get to a point where they're saying stupid things, claiming they can do stupid things. Once in a while on the internet, you'll see somebody who does something real stupid, and it's only because they're drunk. In fact, in the South, there's supposedly this statement, like here, hold my beer, which means he's fixing to do something really stupid. Like see if he can jump from the second floor of one place into the swimming pool. Ends up breaking his leg or whatever. All right, question 2. Give your thoughts about the meaning of verse 4. Somebody care to read verse 4 for us?
As they drank the wine, they praised the gods of gold and silver, of bronze, iron, wood, and stone.
Yeah. As they drank the wine. Again, alcohol. Yeah. In their respect for the false gods, they're being disrespectful to Yahweh. And that, again, is their arrogance playing a role in that. All right. Anyone else? Question 3. Describe the event in verse 5 through 7 and its impact on Belshazzar. Somebody tell us what happened. Summarize that for us in your own words.
This hand mysteriously, and I guess it really wasn't even a hand, these fingers appeared, and it starts writing this stuff on this plaster wall.
Yeah.
And nobody can explain it, and they can't read it.
Yeah, that would be a little,
Spooky?
yes, that's a good word. Be a little spooky. Yeah, yeah. And if you're there, I don't know whether you would attribute it to your drunkenness or whether you would suddenly be sober. It could sober you up in a hurry. I don't know what. But here they are having a good time, not caring about anything or anybody, and all of a sudden this hand pops up, and with a finger writes on the wall. Now, whether it makes an indention into the wall, or whether it's like he dipped his finger in ink and is writing on the wall, we don't know. Just simply that maybe he's just wiping the dust off. We don't know what's going on here. But he writes on the wall. And now, assuming you weren't drunk, if you were there, how would you feel? Yeah. Yeah, I'd probably be scared too. Yeah. Yeah, if I could either get up and run out or be too scared to move. Don't know exactly where I'd be on that. But that would be a startling event. And up to this point, everybody's having a good time. Hey, it's all fun and games. And then all of a sudden, it's like a hand grenade's been thrown out in the middle of you. And wow, things have changed. Yeah. Ran out or hid under the table. Just again, you just have to imagine in your own mind what you would do, assuming you were sober. And if you were drunk, there's probably no telling what you'd do, because we all would act differently in that kind of situation. Anyone else? All right. Next question. Question 4. At this point, what do you think terrified him more? The hand, the words, or not knowing?
Yes.
I got 2 yeses, all right. Yeah. Because, you know, I'm assuming it's an enormous hand. It's not like it's, you know, some guy's hand or some gal's hand. It's probably like a big hand, which tells you immediately it's a giant or it's God. So that would be terrifying.
Another source I read said, take note that it says near the lampstand,
Mm-hmm.
so that it was readily visible and lighted,
Right.
not in a dim place.
Like we would call a spotlight in the spotlight. Yeah, so it's there. It wasn't hidden.
Nobody could deny not seeing.
Yeah. You know, sometimes you in a situation and all of a sudden you say, oh, well, look here. I've never seen this before. There's some marking on this table. They saw the hand. They saw the markings being made. They knew it was something different, supernatural. All right, good. Anyone else?
Again, I said, I'd love to see the Hollywood version of this book of Daniel. See what they did, how they did stuff. Can't find it.
Yeah, I guess it would depend on what part of Hollywood. You know, the Jewish part of Hollywood at one time made some pretty good movies about the Bible because they stayed fairly close to the facts. But today we've got a different generation, and they're almost anti-biblical, so there's no telling what it would look like today.
Whole different agenda.
Yeah, they have a totally different agenda. But if someone who would treat it in an honest way, yeah. And you know, to a sense, we're left to a certain part of our imagination here. I mean, we're told some things, but still, that doesn't tell us everything about how it happened. Now, if you went to Sunday school as a kid, you probably saw a picture of a hand that was, you know, just without attached to an arm, and it's just, you know, writing on the wall. But that, again, was somebody's version of how it happened, or somebody's vision.
Speaking of Hollywood, Charles, I was watching the book of Matthew last night on Prime Video. It's pretty accurate. They baptized Jesus.
Yeah, actually, I think we showed that movie on the Matthew movie here several years ago, many years ago. Oh, by the way, Sunday was my 20th year at Eastwood. So, good or bad, one way or the other. Now, question 5. Consider how the Queen Mother could know. I left the word know out. How could the Queen Mother know about Daniel, but Belshazzar does not? He's king.
He's younger,
He's a young squirt.
or younger,
Yeah, younger.
as you said, that
And who is she?
Queen Mother.
Queen Mother.
The wife of the previous king.
And she likely,
She knew what he did.
she knew what he'd done in the past. Yeah. So she comes to him and says, hey, I know about somebody that you maybe not remember, but he was a pretty smart guy.
And this is after the magicians and all these other people failed to decipher what was written.
Yeah, none of them have a clue what it says, what it means. And I'm sure there were plenty of people there telling them what went on, assuming they weren't. At least some of them weren't there anyway. So she goes back a ways. I've got it on next week's lesson. I'll read it here. All right, this is regards to chapter 6. Chapter 6 is approximately 69 years after chapter 1 and 30 years after chapter 5. So that means where we are now in chapter 5 is about 40 years after chapter 1.
And Bible.org said, now they know, I don't know, that chapter 4, there's 23-year gap between chapter 4 and chapter 5. Bible.org said 23 years.
Yeah, well, that's from 2?
No, that's between chapter 4 and 5.
Right, okay. But then you go to chapter 1. So when Daniel comes on the scene, and we'll get into that a little more next week, he's a young man, and this is now at least 40 years later. I assume he still has his position that had been given to him, but it kind of sounds like he may have been pushed out, replaced, relegated to a lesser important position. Maybe he's retired on government disability. I don't know. But he's approaching 60 years old. And so he doesn't have a prominent position in the king's eyes, and he doesn't know who he is. So his mama has to tell him. I know a guy who's pretty smart. Question 6. Comment on the king's question to Daniel, verses 13, 14, and 15.
You're the guy that people were talking about? You're the guy that my mother sent to me? And you do what she said you did?
Yeah.
Sounds like he's never met Daniel.
Yeah, he sounds like he's clueless, doesn't it? Yeah. And my mom's giving you a big build-up, a good reputation. Can you do it? Is it real? Is she lying? Is she mixed up? Is she confused? I mean, who believes your old mama anyway, right? And so, in a way, he's as king, he's trying to make sure he's getting good advice.
How long has he been king?
That I can't tell you. I don't recall. A few years. He's not brand new, I don't think. It's kind of hard to keep those guys. Well, if you've looked on the back of your question, read that little article in the back by David Lusk, you understand that has been some confusion in the past about how long they were there and who was really there. But yeah, he's willing to listen to Daniel because Queen Mother said you need to talk to this guy. But he's still looking for. It's like a job interview. You're going to hire someone, and hey, you've been recommended as a bookkeeper. Can you add? You want to know what kind of skills does he have? You've been recommended as an electrician. You know anything about That's what he's asking for. It's like a question of his abilities, not necessarily to doubt him, but at least to get that reassurance. All right, and in question 7, Daniel is offered a big reward, and what does he say about it and why?
I can't remember, but my opinion is he probably isn't impressed at all.
Not impressed by the reward?
Yeah.
All right. Anybody else?
I don't think he wanted to take credit for being able to do what he's able to do.
All right.
It's not him working, it's God.
Say, I don't deserve a reward because it's not me doing it, it's Yahweh. Okay, good. Anyone else? His motivation is certainly not money or wealth. His motivation is to reveal the vision of God and, let the king know what God is trying to tell him. In the political world, it seems that there are a lot of people who are driven more by money than by service to country. And, we're going to see, we've seen a little bit of that so far in the book of Daniel. We're going to see a little bit again, I think, in the next chapter and after that as well. But Daniel is basically saying, I don't need your reward. I don't need a promotion. I don't need a bonus. I'm just going to tell you what it means. But it's not me, it's God. Now, the contrast to this is, who's he just been mocking? The king. Who's the king just been mocking? God, Yahweh. Yeah. With the goblets. Hey, I got Yahweh's goblet. Yeah, that makes me bigger and better than him. So now he's kind of being put in his place. being humbled, we might say, in regards to his previous arrogance.
To his credit, Charles, he also learned, Daniel learned the lesson from the previous king for being arrogant to see what happened to him.
Yeah.
You know, so if I do the same thing, the same thing's gonna happen to me. Well, I know better, learn, and I know better anyway.
And
That temptation.
and that's part of what he does with the little history lesson he gives. You know, you remember Nebuchadnezzar, your grandfather? Well, let me tell you what happened with there. And you know, I don't know if you've ever sat with your grandparents and they suddenly tell you a big story and you had to say to them, I never heard that before. You've never told me that before. And, you know, it's like a big story and you want to know more and you're wondering, why didn't you tell me this? Why haven't you been filling me in on the details all this time? Because we don't know all of history. We don't know all of history. I know it was a sad thing, but I did not know until, I was in my mid, if not late teens, that my grandfather had been hit by a train. He pulled his car up on the railroad track, hit him, and my grandmother and I guess it would be my dad's sister-in-law, or what is it? Yeah, sister-in-law, were in the back seat, and they survived, and he died. I didn't know any of that. And all of a sudden I hear that, and it's like a shock to me. Well, here's the king, Belshazzar, and he doesn't know that story. Or if he heard it as a kid, you know how we are as kids? That's not important. I know when I went into school, World War II had just ended, and they started talking about World War I. I don't want to hear about World War I. I was too old. I was too far back. It wasn't that far in reality, but to me as a 6, 7, 8-year-old kid, it was. You know? So he's learning a lesson about what happened to the previous king. Daniel is giving him a history lesson because what happened in the past is about to happen again, is happening again right now. And you need to learn that lesson. What's that thing? Those who do not know history are what? Yeah, they're doomed to repeat it. Now, what is that? What is that saying? Yeah, you ain't learned nothing. If you don't learn from the mistakes of others, you know, then you're going to end up doing the same thing. You know, we can learn from our own mistakes, but it's better if we learn from someone else's mistakes. Problem is, we don't always want to listen to those old folks. And yeah, and sometimes it's too late by the time we hear it. All right, good. So he gives him this history lesson, basically for the benefit of knowing that this is what happened. God helped then, God can help now. And that God is Yahweh. It's not the God of gold, silver, you know, wood, and etc. that were listed in the verse before. All right, question 9. Explain what Daniel said about the king. (22 and 23).
You have not humbled yourself.
That's one of the things we started talking about in the very beginning of our lesson tonight. Arrogance.
You have set yourself up against the Lord of heaven.
Yeah. Now, amplify that a little bit. What does that mean, you set yourself up against the Lord of heaven? Snubbed him? Good.
Well, Daniel tells Belshazzar that you've not humbled yourself, though you do all this. He tells him, I don't do this.
Yeah.
He's of no consequence to me. Basically what he said.
So what Belshazzar had done basically is lifted himself above all the kings, including Yahweh, all the gods, including Yahweh, put himself at the top of the heap. I'm the big stuff. Everybody else is nothing. And Daniel is saying, boy, did you ever get that wrong? Yahweh is the one. So you set yourself up against Yahweh as being better and more powerful, more wise than him. And that's not the case. You know, in many ways, we like to think we are advanced beyond these ancient times, but in truth, we still act the same way. Maybe not those of us in this assembly here, this group here, because, you know, you're believers and you want to serve Yahweh through Jesus Christ. But the world out there, which is where Belshazzar is, he's not a follower of God. Closest he would get is he might worship God along with all the other gods. He might worship Yahweh along with all the other gods. But our world today, in our society, to a great extent, is rejecting God completely. And, you know, I read statistics that come to me through various sources, and it's saying that we are at a point now where less than 50% of the people in our nation believe in God. Think about that.
And of those, I think a good percentage of that believe in God don't do anything.
Even the believers are not doing much about it.
They don't go to church or
Right.
anything like that. But if you ask them if they're going to go to heaven when they die, they'll tell you yes.
Yeah, they'll say, I'm a believer and I am going to heaven. I want to go. Yeah. Which in a sense is denying the fact that they believe in God, because they say, because I want to, means they're putting themselves in the position of God. Sort of like's happening here. Belshazzar is saying, I'm going to do it because I'm powerful, I can do it. All right, good. Anyone else? All right. Question 10. Share what you learned about the words Minnie, Tickle, Parson and their meaning.
Well, the first one, God has numbered the days of your reign and brought it to an end.
Okay, God has numbered the days of your reign and it's coming to an end.
They're all Aramaic.
They are Aramaic, and in those ancient languages, particularly Aramaic and Hebrew, they didn't use the vowels. And vowels were not letters, they were diacritical markings. You know, like if there's a jot or a tittle Jesus talks about, there's a mark here and a slash here and a curve here and something like that. Those are the vowels. And when they wrote, they didn't put the vowels in. They didn't put in the diacritical marking. So you imagine reading a letter that had no vowels. I mean, if somebody wrote a letter to you, you know, a book or whatever, and it had no A, E, I, O, U, or Y in it, and you tried to read that, how would you pronounce those words? Well, you would pronounce them because you've used them so many times, you just remembered what they were. But these words, depending on how they're pronounced, can mean different things. So the scholars, you know, bounce around on what the meanings are. Well, that was the second one you mentioned.
Well, I was going to say mene is equivalent to amina. Tekel to a shekel. And Paris may also be read as Paras, Persia, Persians, a running reference to the Medes and Persians.
Okay? And overall, what does it mean?
He ain't going to be around much longer.
Not going to be around much longer. Okay, good. Anything else?
Babylon is going down.
What's going?
Babylon,
Babylon's going down. Yeah.
the two words, P-A-R-S-I-N and P-E-R-E-S, I read P-E-R-E-S is the singular, and the P-A-R-S-I-N is a plural.
Okay. And when they're put together, it sort of comes out, you have been weighed in the balance and found wanting. Now, we know what a balance scale is. If you've never used one, you've probably at least seen one in a film or a TV show or a movie or something like that. They have a weight, that it's a pound. They put that on one side, and you want a pound of beans, and so they pour the beans on the other side until it levels off, and then you know you got a pound of beans.
And you can think of it in terms of children on a seesaw on a playground. If you have a heavy, large child on one end and a small, light child on the other,
Yeah.
it is not balanced.
And if they're balanced, then they can use their legs and have a good time. But in this case, he's saying, you have been weighed and you have been found wanting. You know, you're light. Now, he's not talking about physical weight, though, is he? What's he talking about? Faith? Okay, yeah. He doesn't have any faith in Yahweh. His attitude. His arrogance. Yeah. You know, there are some people who are not necessarily criminals, but they're just not fun to be around. You know, they're not nice to be around. I'm not accusing the king here of, you know, committing any horrible crimes, but go back to the beginning and look at his arrogance all the way through this. It seems like when you get to be king, you get to wear the arrogance crown. You know, I'm the biggest, greatest, best, or whatever. And
The thing of it is he's not the only one. The books of Kings
yeah.
are all full.
Right, because arrogance is a problem. But here he is who thinks he's the biggest and baddest, and Yahweh says, no, you're not. No, you're not. You think you're the best? No, you're not. You know, maybe you've seen it where somebody, you know, they're always bragging about what they can do and how well they can do it. Maybe whether it's a kid on the school ground bragging about how fast he can run or whatever, or somebody at work about how many sales they've made and can't continue to make, and then someone comes in and blows them away. And that's what's happened here. Yahweh is saying to the king, you don't measure up. You're not even close. As a matter of fact, you and your kingdom are about to fall flat on your face. Going to be destroyed. Anyone else? All right. Question 11. Let's talk again about your thoughts on the reward, verse 29.
Maybe it could have been a form of bribery. Daniel talks about it, not fulfilling what
Yeah.
happened.
We give Daniel enough money, maybe he'll get Yahweh to back off. Well, Yahweh will back off. That's one of the interesting things about Daniel and all the other places where we read of God interacting with his people. He always leaves the door open for repentance. Yahweh always leaves an escape. You know, you've been bad, but you know what? If you'll repent, come to your senses, start living like you're supposed to, I'll take care of you. God doesn't need a bribe. Daniel didn't need a bribe. Daniel doesn't want the reward because it's not me, it's God.
One source said this was an empty gift because Belshazzar was killed that very night.
Yeah.
We don't know what time of day this took place.
Even if he had promised him and Daniel said, okay, I'll take your promise, when Belshazzar was gone the next day, what happens to that promissory note? It's no good, is it? Because Belshazzar died.
Well, it says Daniel's clothes in the purple and the gold chain was placed around his neck, but it wasn't any good to him.
Right. Because he couldn't be in the royal family if the royal family suddenly disappeared. Now, the gold chain would still have some ongoing value, but not that much.
Say he kept the gold chain. He didn't want the gold. He didn't want anything.
Yeah.
Say maybe when he got home, he gave it all to somebody else.
All right. So what we're seeing here, although it's, I think, kind of disguised or hidden, is we're seeing great arrogance on the part of the king, and on the part of Daniel, what are we seeing? Humility. Yeah. He's being humble. He's saying, all the credit goes to God. It's not me. I'm just God's spokesman. Where anybody else in the wise man crowd would be saying, yeah, give me more. I'll take what you got and anything else you want to give me. But Daniel's saying, no, it's not me. So we've got the contrast here of the arrogance and the humility that's happening. All right, question 12 says, imagine what may have been going on behind the scenes. Verse 30. Yeah, et tu, Brute. Yeah, this assassination may have already been in the plans. God didn't make them do this. The likelihood is they were already. And as you read about the intrigue, the conflict that's going on in the royal court here and in the next chapter as well, you see that these people are not all gung-ho supporting the king. He's got enemies in his own house because some of them want either more money or higher position, or maybe they want to be king themselves. They want the power, they want the money. Yeah, that's what they want. And that's the problem in an earthly world that they're struggling with. So there was trouble in his house and he didn't even know it. He throws this big party, and one of the reasons we may throw a big party today. I mean, if it's somebody's birthday, we throw a party for them. But if you just have a bunch of friends over, why are you doing that? Maybe attention to yourself, or maybe you just want to share in the camaraderie and build the closeness. And he's not doing that here. For him, it's about him. And he's trying to show his court what a good king and a powerful king I am. Not that he's there for the people and to help them. No, it's all about himself. And that is shown in his attitude toward Yahweh as well as his attitude toward other people. Anyone else care to share anything?
They were friends before he became king. Maybe they were good friends, but once he became king, you don't know who your real friends are. You become famous, you don't know who your real friends are. All of a sudden you got money. Hey, you win the lottery, you got relatives coming out of the woodwork. Hey,
Yeah. And we see that in our world when somebody becomes suddenly rich. Say they're a big sports figure and all of a sudden they're get a contract for millions of dollars, or maybe they're a movie star and they have a big success, or a boxers. Oh, all the boxers that you knew growing up through at least in my case, in the 40s and 50s and 60s, nearly every one of them died broke. And one of the reasons is because their friends were taken from them. Ask, can you loan me 1,000 or 10,000, what it was? Yeah. And here, the king thinks he's at the top. Not only is he not at the top in the eyes of Yahweh, he's not really at the top in the eyes of his court, his friends. Because they're trying to take from him, and we see here that very night, he's going to die. And he's going to die because somebody's going to kill him. And somebody's going to kill him because they want his spot.
Wouldn't the king go to bed with some kind of security around the bedroom or whatever? So maybe the security paid off?
Yeah, we don't know all the intrigue that was there, but that could very well be the case. Hey, they could give him $100 to walk away, or hey, why don't you go get a cup of coffee and I'll stand here while you take a break.
It only works if they're loyal to the person.
Yeah, they have to be loyal to the king to be good bodyguards for him. So again, we don't know all the intrigue that was involved in this, but what we do know is that he's going down as king, his kingdom is going down, and it's going to be taken over by another group. And we'll be getting into that in chapter 6. Well, we moved through this pretty quickly tonight. Got anybody else that wants to share anything?
Well, doesn't the president of the United States have security guards around his bedroom? I mean, you can put the whole building is secure.
Yeah. You know, and that's the case in anyone who's in a position of power, whether it's political, criminal, you know, whatever. You know, which is like today, people saying, yeah, they're saying we need to cut back on the police, but they got their own private security. You know, cameras and guards out, armed guards out in their house, but they're saying cut back on the police. Well, that's because they have their own security. Well, they have to be paid before they're going. You know, and if you stop paying your security people, guess what? They're going to quit coming around. But again, there are lessons here for the Jewish people, and because the book of Daniel is not written for the kings of Babylon, it's written for us, written for the Jews, and then subsequently it comes down to disciples of Christ. People of faith. And what lessons are we learning here? Well, we're learning arrogance is not good, humility is good, and being faithful in tough times is very important. And that's what Daniel and his comrades are doing. All right, here is, Chuck, I'll let you distribute this if you want to. These are questions for chapter 6. We'll talk about them next week. And at this point, the first question deals with part of what we've already mentioned. We get in chapter 6, Daniel's an old man. And the only reason I want to bring this up is that in Bible classes where we've got, you know, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the lion's den, and Daniel and they're in the fiery furnace, and Daniel's in the lion's den. They're typically portrayed as, you know, young, virile people. But here in chapter 6, Daniel is probably close to 85. So he's not a spring chicken. Time has gone forward. And that's what I want us to see in this book, is it's not a detailed diary of just a couple of weeks. This is a highlight spread out over, you know, a long period of time, several decades. All right, we know that, at least what I've heard, is that those that have been on our sick list and prayer list have been making some improvement. I know Chuck has talked with Bob Mechanic, and he seems to be improving a little bit. I don't know if anybody's heard anything from Bob Walker or not.
Talked to Bob for a couple of weeks, or Walker.
Yeah.
I need,
Say again? Yeah. Okay. And how's they doing? Okay. You know, didn't think about it in the beginning, but because that tumor is on the base of his tongue, it certainly affected his ability to talk and communicate. Good. Glad that's making progress.
when I talked to him, the only way he could communicate was through this.
Yeah. Okay. Well, continue to keep them in your prayers.
Susie's brother had more of his leg amputated. Because of a infection.
What'd you say the last part?
He had an infection.
Another infection?
Yeah, it was dripping. Dripping. His amputation, there was a hole that was dripping.
Okay.
He had about 1 foot more. The spirits are not the biggest.
Yeah. I can only imagine. All right, anything else? Anyone else? Well, why don't we sit and visit a while?